What's up, Coach Kevin? We're live. We're live at 5.
I almost have, what is it? Ecstasy of gold, that's it.
I don't know what you're saying. I don't know what kind of words come out of your mouth. Is it raining outside? Oh, it's totally raining. I'm so glad I got my car washed yesterday. That worked out well for me. What's up, party people? We're ready. We're ready. Coach Kevin, what are you doing?
We're so ready.
We are so ready. You're not ready.
I'm ready.
You're not ready.
Look at my pants. You don't have the pants of a person who's ready.
What is that belt over there? What is a belch? Why is the belch here? What do you do with your belch? Your black belch? You know what we do with the people who leave their black belches? We try to throw it up there to make you, I guess, you could probably just reach up and grab it. That's the problem.
I'm very tall. Oh man.
All right, Kevin. Well, you know what we forgot yesterday?
What did we forget?
Code word.
Code word.
We didn't give a code word.
Mark Ruffalo.
It could be like a secret. We did that the day before. We could do like a day where there was no code word, and that would be like the secret code word, the no code word code word.
I think we should stick to Mark.
All right, I'm gonna say instead of Mark Ruffalo, today we're gonna say the Gruffalo.
The Gruffalo.
The Gruffalo.
I'm not gonna remember that.
Well, you don't have to. You're not eligible to win any prizes.
Sweet. Perfect.
You're already the big winner. You get to hang out here all the
I
time.
am the prize.
You are. You don't want to go that far.
If you win,
Mhm.
just kidding.
Let's see. Can I walk on this thing?
Oh, that's more impressive than mine.
I don't know. It's kind of slippery. I'm gonna kill myself here. Whoa.
That would be the weirdest way to lose my job.
What's that? What?
This is my boss. Fell off a ball.
Fell off the ball. Oh well. Whoa. Oh, that's fun. All right, Gruffalo. That was yesterday's. The Gruffalo. It's a children's story.
Oh.
It's actually, my kids love it.
Oh. It has nothing to do with Mark Ruffalo.
It's a pretty fun. It's a funny story. You want to hear the story? In a nutshell. I won't sing it.
You sing it?
Yeah, there's a song. You can do a song.
I want to hear the
The
song.
story.
No,
This is
song.
no. I can't sing the song. I don't remember the words. But I've heard it sung. I don't know if it's not. It's a book.
We can look it up.
We could look it up, but not right now. But let me tell you about the story of the Gruffalo, because it's a pretty interesting story. It's about this mouse that is walking through the woods, and it gets like basically accosted by all these different woodland predators, like an owl and a snake, and they're all like, where are you going, little mouse? And he's basically like, I'm gonna go see
The Gruffalo.
the Gruffalo. And they're like, the Gruffalo, what's a Gruffalo? And then he talks about the Gruffalo, and they're like, they get scared,
Yeah.
because he talks about like how it likes to eat hawks or owls and mice and snake, or foxes and snakes and stuff like that. So they hear about this thing.
So it's a lesson about.
I'm going to lunch. Basically about how to BS people. And then what happens is the mouse eventually runs into a real Gruffalo. Like it actually does exist.
Yeah.
Or no, let's see. I'm trying to remember because there's like a twist on it. I haven't read this book in a long time, but it's okay. So the mouse is going through the woods. It sees these different predators. He talks about the Gruffalo or the Gruffalo, and then I think there is actually the real Gruffalo. And then what happens is the mouse runs into the Gruffalo, and then it talks about how, and the Gruffalo's like, I'm going to eat you now.
Yeah.
Right? And the mouse is like, no, you shouldn't mess with me because everybody's scared of me. And so they go back, and then he's like, hey, Al, come on down here. And Al's like, no, I'm busy. I don't want to come out. And whatever.
Yeah.
So then the Gruffalo's like, oh man, this mouse is a badass.
Yeah.
So anyway, it is kind of like how to buff your way out of anything,
Yeah. Huh.
And then there's the Gruffalo's Child. It's another book where the Gruffalo hears the legend of this. I think the Gruffalo doesn't know it's called a Gruffalo. It's just like a big monster
Yeah.
that the mouse has been describing, but didn't think it was real.
Gruffalo.
Yeah.
That reminds me of there's a story that I heard about like they were doing studies on monkeys or something, some sort of like, I don't know, they're being mean to animals. Anyway, so they put a bunch of monkeys in.
Engaging in a lot of animal experimentation.
Yeah, I don't know, I don't approve, but I find it fascinating. Anyway, so they put like a bunch of monkeys or chimpanzees, some sort of ape, into a cage, and then they put like a ladder or something,
Mm-hmm.
and then they put like a prize at the top, right? And then so if a monkey climbs up and tries to grab the banana, the room that they're in releases like a whole bunch of cold water that other monkeys really don't like, right? So like
It's so messed up.
yeah, right. It's like it sucks, and so they all learn to like not climb the ladder and go get the banana. And
Okay.
So what happens is they continue on. They like really establish this behavior pattern, and then they'll introduce another monkey, like a new one, and the new one's like, heck yeah, banana. And then he tries to go up, and all the monkeys will start beating him. Right?
The worst experiment.
Right? Because the other monkeys are
They
like,
don't want to get wet.
yeah, they don't
Don't
want to
ask,
get wet,
don't
so
get
and they can't like explain it to this guy. So
No,
just,
they
like,
might beat the crap out of
yeah, they just like beat the crap out of him. And then eventually they like cycle through all the monkeys, and every new monkey that comes in, the rest of them just hop on and just beat the crap out of him. Eventually, they replace all the monkeys where none of them know that, like,
why?
there's no reason
Yeah,
why.
that is-
Right? So like another monkey comes in, they just beat the crap out of him.
Because
And,
they
like,
just like lost all association with the banana. They just think
Yeah,
that
they're-
that's the greedy ceremony.
well, it's still like associated. Like if you try and go after the banana, you'll get the crap beaten out of them. But like eventually they took away the water mechanism or something. So like any of them could have gone up and gotten
Right,
it.
but they just don't want to test it.
Yeah.
And this is how culture is born,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
This is how humans, learn how to behave.
Metaphors. There was a story of like, it's like the same story, but this woman is making a loaf that she got from a family recipe. She got from her mom, and her mom got it from her grandma. And like the recipe calls to like cut off the ends of the roast before you put it in.
Uh-huh.
And she didn't understand why, so she asked her mom. The mom didn't understand why, so they asked the grandma. And the joke is better when it's told, or the story is better. But short version is like the grandma was cutting off the ends of the roast because the pan was too small.
Oh.
So like for generations they've been like they had
This is the way it's done. This is my grandma did
It's
it.
like this is how we do it, and it was just. Like,
It makes it taste better.
yeah, I don't know. Like it's just.
'Cause
You're
I
not
think,
gonna
like
deviate from the original
yeah.
plan. That was grandma's recipe.
Yeah.
And then I don't know. Thought it was funny.
It is funny. Yeah, that's. Well, it's one of those things. I think it's actually a mark of intelligence amongst humans that it's almost like instructions, right? Like someone can show us something and we just do it, even though we think there may be a better way. This is not true for everyone, obviously, but
Yeah.
this is maybe
But,
proven
like,
more in the.
You don't understand the reason why. Like it is what it is.
Well, it's kind of like I think there's another experiment where you have like a monkey or whatever, and there's a box, and there's some like treat inside the box, and the monkey just kind of goes through like trying to do all the different manipulations with the box in order to get to the banana. And a human on the other hand, if you show them a very specific way, they will copy
Yeah.
you.
Monkeys don't copy?
Even though there may be a more obvious way to do it that may be wrong,
Yeah.
So you'll learn, through observing, and you'll copy. Monkeys may or may not copy it in that fashion, but usually they try to break the box against the ground. It's like
Yeah.
it's not, and they might just cycle through a bunch of different behaviors to figure, like I want the banana, so just give me the goddamn banana. They're not like.
Problem solving.
There's certain steps that are actually not required. So you can show like small children, you show them a very intricate series of steps, some of which are totally irrelevant to actually the operation of the contraption. And they will, it's like a ritual, right? You just kind of do the ritual and then you show the kid will do this, they'll copy it back to you.
Yeah.
Whereas the monkey will be like, that has nothing to do with opening that box, so I'm not going to do it. You know what I mean? Like they'll figure out that they don't need to do that step, and they'll just eliminate the step. Yeah.
That's fun. Well, I wanted to talk about cults today. Can we talk about
Yes, let's do it. I love cults.
What is a cult?
Well, I'm sure that there is a proper definition that I don't know. We do have these supercomputers in our pockets now, So we can look up the definition. Let's start with the definition of a cult. Here, I'm going to give you my layman's totally off the cuff definition of a cult, which is some sort of religious following or group that is marked by some sort of slavish or unquestioned devotion to a single person.
I like how you threw in religious in there, just in case.
I mean, you can have a non-religious cult, but I think most cults are known in the context of a religion.
Yeah.
But I don't know that that's true. That's just my off-the-top-cuff definition.
What do you think is brainwashing? Because you've mentioned, like, I've said a couple of things and you're like, oh, that sounds like brainwashing. And I've wanted to dig into that idea, but...
I think again, this is my non-technical, I don't know what the dictionary definition is, working definition, is that, brainwashing is conditioning a person to act for the benefit of someone else or something else in a manner that's contrary to their own best self-interests. Right? Like if I tell you, like, hey, go run across the street and play, like while the traffic's going.
Yeah.
You would say to me, well, just wait a second, I'll go and, like, whatever, if you feel like there is a good reason for you to go across the street, say,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, just wait a second, I'll go, and after the cars go by. But if I tell you, Kevin, go right now, if you're brainwashed, you'll go and do it.
Really?
Right? Yeah, because you just listen to me, you have faith in me. Misplaced, but you have faith.
Faith is interesting. Is faith bad?
It can be good or bad. Cult, a system of religious veneration or devotion directed towards a particular figure or object. A relatively small group of people having religious beliefs or practices regarded by others as strange or sinister. A misplaced or excessive admiration for a particular person or thing. So I kind of mixed up, some of these all together, I would say. I didn't account for the thing, right? There are definitely objects that people venerate just for the sake of venerating the object in and of itself.
Yeah.
It's like idolatry, I guess is what you would call that.
Like that woman who wants to sleep with, like, Ferris wheels, I think it was? Is that the same?
There are people that have sex with trees and stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a cult. It's weird. It's cult-like. It is not like but whatever, hey,
Yeah. How many people do you need to have a cult? Is it 3, like a plane?
Well, you need one thing or person with which the cult has.
The focus.
Yeah, the focus of the cult. I would say you need at least, I think 3 is like a minimum number. 2 is just kind of like a...
2's a line.
Yeah, I don't think that you can't really commit a cult. I would just say like a bunch of, kind of, what is 2? What would be 2?
It's a conversation.
Yeah. I like that. Why do you want to talk about cults? I've read a lot about cults.
I don't know.
Or listened to a lot of things about cults.
I wanted to talk about brainwashing.
About brainwashing?
Yeah.
All right.
Go
ahead.
What is it?
I just told you what I thought it was. You want me to look that up too? Jesus.
Well, you said you looked up cults, so I figured we would go with the brainwashing. Because usually that's like, they go together, right?
Yeah.
Could you be in a cult without getting brainwashed?
You could be in a cult, but, there's a certain... This reminds me of there's a Key and Peele skit where the cult, they're outside the cult after everybody else. Like they go to the store and then the cult like all commits mass suicide, and then come back and there's like a news van or whatever, the cops, and then they're like, no, we're totally not members of that cult. What are you talking about? It's pretty funny. But you could be, right? Like the last thing I read about cults was about Jim Jones in Jonestown.
Yeah. He's from Indiana, isn't he?
He is from Indiana.
Yeah.
And there were people who were more or less dedicated to him, right? Like you can do a lot and not be totally brainwashed, right? Like there are people who killed their children, essentially because he ordered people to like all commit suicide.
Didn't he also like force people to do a little bit? I'm sure.
The process of pressuring someone into adopting radically different beliefs by using systematic and often forceful means. That's one of the definitions. The funny thing about Jim Jones, I don't think that he physically, there was physical discipline, right? There was actually some pretty brutal physical discipline, but the people at Jonestown, they weren't all it wasn't like they were tricked into drinking cyanide.
Yeah.
I think the vast majority of the adults knew what was happening. There were people who did speak out, and I'm not sure if they were killed. I don't know that part of it. I stopped listening at that point because the podcast I was listening to was like playing the tapes. Like they recorded everything. Yeah. And I was like, oh man, I can't listen to this. This is too intense. I'm gonna have nightmares. So, but yeah, there was a woman who was particularly dedicated to Jim Jones, who was actually out of not at Jonestown at the time, and then she learned that he had, basically had committed mass suicide, and she murdered her own kids and then committed suicide herself. Even though she was she could have done anything she wanted to. She was no longer beholden to him, and she was also one of the, my understanding is a very dedicated and powerful member of the cult. There were actually, they talked about how it wasn't just Jim Jones. Like there were actually people kind of like in his inner circle, and they were just as vicious and brutal in terms of exercising power, and dictating things, using their connection to Jim Jones.
What was their goal, like the organization?
Well, it morphed over time. It wasn't, originally it was almost like he was a civil rights figure in Indiana. He was actually the civil rights commissioner of Indianapolis for a period of time. Weird. And he and his followers really saw themselves as, part of the civil rights movement. He had a lot of, he was one of the few integrated churches at the time. And that was very, radical. And some of his staunchest and longest followers were like old black ladies who came to his church because he preached this social gospel, of integration and equal rights. He adopted a black kid, and treated him as good, if not better, than his own children.
So not very good.
No, he treated his children well.
Didn't he kill them?
Well, later, but there was a period of time where, and he did a lot of good, right? Like this was the scary thing. Like he created nursing homes, and he created after-school programs, and he taught in schools like history. He had a social agenda that he acted on. He wasn't look, I'm going to sound like I'm defending Jim Jones, which I'm not, but he worked hard, and a lot for a period of time. They worked hard to create like that kind of the society that they thought should exist. And that ultimately got turned into, or those things got turned into tools of oppression amongst their followers, right? And brainwashing and things like that, and manipulation. Because people had good intentions. Like a lot of the church members were not cynical. They were true believers in kind of his social and the church's social mission. And he lived, his church had a large operating income, but he wasn't one of these types that's like off driving in Mercedes Benzes or Rolls Royces, living some sort of like wealthy lifestyle while his followers all get kind of slaved away. Like he kind of walked the walk too. He was definitely a man of his people, for sure. Not to say he didn't enjoy certain privileges, namely sleeping with all the women and some of the men, but their agenda was like kind of building this integrated or integrationist, paradise on earth. He was a socialist.
Do you remember around what year this happened?
Well, I want to say that Jonestown happened sometime in like 78 or 77. I think that's right. I was surprised to learn I was like 7 or 8 years old when this happened, and it was on the news. But when you see things on the news when you're that age, you don't really know whether you really saw them or whether you saw it on YouTube. You know what I mean? Like the memories are weird. I was too young nobody was putting me in front of the news to watch. Yeah. I remember kind of the Iran hostage crisis. I remember Ford. I remember Jimmy Carter winning the election against Ford. Like that's my first real political memory. But he started in the 60s. And he started off in Indiana, and then eventually he made his way up to, I think, Ukiah, up in Northern California, and that's where People's Temple was for a long time. After 68, 69, well, he was there before that, but he had like a huge compound where all the church members would live.
I thought the compound was in Like South America or Central America?
Well, no, so what happened was he had his thing in Indiana, and then he closed that down, went to South America, did some shady stuff down there with the CIA, maybe. That's a theory, the conspiracy theory. But I mean, there's some good stuff to suggest that really he was doing something down there. Then he went to California, and he started his compound in California. And then at some point things got so, he felt so much pressure and he got kind of unmasked. He did a lot of faith healing and stuff like that, and then people started like figuring out. I mean, it's not hard to figure out you're full of shit, right? But people figured it out. And so then he moved. He felt like they were being too oppressed, and then they moved down to, I want to say, was it Bolivia? Was it Bolivia?
I'm getting Bolivia in my head.
I think it was Bolivia. I was about to say Belize, but I don't think it was Belize. That's Central America. But, you know, it's one of those things where, you know, when you talk about brainwashing, like these people, a lot of them were really highly educated. Some of them weren't, but a lot of them were highly educated, wealthy, you know, came from privileged backgrounds. They were smart people, and they were, I think they were taken in by kind of the rhetoric on the one hand, right? And he would, you know, when they had a new recruit, he did not skim on attempting to figure out about, you know, every piece of information about a potential recruit, especially if they were if they were going to be valuable to him, right? So there was, you know, if you were a lawyer, you know, he had a guy who was one of his right-hand lieutenants, I forget his name, but he was an assistant district attorney in the county in California. And so, you know, Jones went out of his way to like dig through his trash and figure out every last thing about this guy.
Yeah.
And, you know, use that as like, hey, you know, God told me Jesus told me all this stuff about you.
Huh.
You know, they would go and break into people's homes and figure out, like, you know, one of the tricks that he would do, and these are people looking for spiritual, you know, enlightenment and spiritual, and so he took advantage of that. So he would know, because you have to get referral. You couldn't just walk in.
Yeah.
And so like a church member would tell him, like, look, this is one of my friends, they're from work, whatever, they're gonna come. And he'd be like, okay, and then he'd send a group of people out to go find out, literally dig through, like break in their house, dig through their garbage.
Yeah.
And what he would do is he'd find like an unpaid electric bill or, you know, some other thing. And he'd be like, you know what, God told me.
You're having problems with your utility?
Yeah, and you know what, not only that, but it's already been paid and taken care of. You know, so he would do this stuff, which sounds hokey to us, but
before the internet.
you know, before the internet, and if you were one of these credulous people who really seeking, you know, spiritual guidance and enlightenment, you know, he totally took advantage of that. So, yeah, he would do all those things, and that was like, you know, people want to believe what they want to believe, and he would supply it for them. And then they would be taken in, and they would see like the community really did work hard for each other. You know, people did. There were sincere people who worked really hard for the social mission of the church. And so gradually over time, and that wasn't the only way they got sucked in, they would do these like struggle sessions where, you know, you would confess your sins, and then they would, you know, kind of hold that against you or threaten that. You know, when that were to get public, you know, whatever you're confiding your deepest, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
So, you know, there was some intimidation and pressure as well at times. People had their families. You know, it was hard for somebody, you know, they had the story of this right-hand man, the lawyer, the district attorney at ADA, and they said in the beginning, this guy, his wife was not, she was very, very, very skeptical, right? And, but she was in love with her husband, and she, you know, they were a new couple, and she wanted to kind of, you know, go along. And eventually she got sucked into it too, and she wound. It got so bad. So this is how, talk about twisted stuff that Jim Jones would do. Right? I want to give him off as like, oh, he just, you know, was such a nice guy. At one point, look, he was having, he was sleeping with a lot of people in the church, and he would always make it as like, oh, I'm exhausted, you know, I'm just doing this to help you, you know, because you need to, you know, whatever. This is going to help you, right? This is kind of the gaslighting type of manipulation.
Why is that? That's like always the tactic, it seems. Because the Nexium, was it?
Yeah.
He did that too.
It's basically like, hey, listen, I don't have any sexual needs or desires, but I know, because I'm perfect, I know you do, and you don't want to cheat on your husband or your wife, but so having sex with me isn't really cheating, because I'm essentially God on earth, and so you can't cheat. It's okay. You know, it's like that. It sounds ridiculous to us, but whatever, right? Whatever. So anyway, this guy, the ADA, Jim Jones is like, hey, listen, I'm exhausted. I can't handle all these women. Will you do me a favor and just go sleep with this one woman who won't leave me alone? And of course, you know, this guy's he's a guy, whatever.
He's a red-blooded American.
I mean, whatever. I'm not making excuses for him either, but he's having trouble with his wife or whatever, because his wife is kind of questioning everything. But in any case, he winds up sleeping with this woman at Jim Jones' behest. And then he uses that information against him, but also goes and seduces the wife and winds up getting their permission to father a son with the wife of this dude. Right? I mean, this is kind of like how twisted things get and how wrapped up they got in kind of that cult of personality.
Yeah.
And he was an engaging guy. He was a powerful speaker. You know, he's very charismatic. I mean, if you look at him, he looks ridiculous now, but in the 70s.
Do you remember what the involvement with the CIA was about?
So, there was a, trying to remember the deal. I think it was in Brazil. No, he went to Cuba at one point and tried to, what he said he was doing down there, he said he was going to get, he wanted to buy a lot of land.
In Cuba?
I think it was Cuba and or Brazil. I mean, Cuba's big. I mean, you can, whatever.
Weren't they like international enemies at that point?
Well, this was back in the 60s, so yeah. But you know, there's still ways to get, I mean, maybe it wasn't Cuba, maybe it was somewhere else. I think it was Cuba, I think he was in Havana. But this is one of the things, like, how did he get there? So here's the thing, this is the interesting thing. He had a childhood friend who wound up being a CIA agent. Documented, who worked, and they contacted each other. I don't know about Havana, but in Brazil. So, you know, at the time, I'm trying to remember this part of it, but at the time, you know, like they lived close to each other. You know, Jim Jones was married at this time. I think his kids were with him. But he was down there, and he was doing, I think he was essentially hooking up with some of the Marxist elements down there. You know, meanwhile, you know, the death squads were running around and like sweeping people up and murdering them, right, in Brazil. I mean, it was a military dictatorship at that point. And the US government was essentially helping them, you know, one way or another, right, fight against communism in Brazil, right? Anyway, so, you know, the theory is that Jim Jones was a CIA asset.
Yeah.
And he went around and was gathering information about, because he had real legit civil rights kind of like socialist credentials from America. And so it kind of makes him the perfect kind of guy to go into these groups and say, hey, we want to like work together and I'm on the same page, you know, and so that's the type of person that you kind of want to go in there.
Well, I don't get why, all right, why is Jim Jones the enemy here, not the CIA?
What do you mean? Like, they're working together.
Yeah, they're working together.
Yeah. I didn't say that CIA was not the enemy.
Huh?
I didn't say the CIA was a bunch of good guys, or they weren't I'm not defending the CIA either.
It's just interesting.
The CIA has done a lot of terrible things, both at the behest and independently of the government.
That's their MO, right? They find a group of people who does not like match along with their ideologies politically, and then they accuse them of being sexually deviant.
Or whatever.
And then, no, like,
or whatever.
Usually it's sexual deviance.
Or whatever. Whatever deviance, right? Whatever they can find.
But it's usually
sometimes they are sexually deviant.
Sometimes, but like, you know, that's like the focal point.
Okay.
And then they.
Sometimes they don't wait to be saying that you're sexually deviant. Sometimes they just sweep you up. Depends on where you are. They just get the locals to sweep you up
or they'll
and torture and kill you,
like,
or whatever. Yeah, they don't. I mean, they're not. These are national security operations with people who are not directly or even indirectly accountable to the American people. You know. So I'm not defending their methods. I don't know. You know, I would say on a case-by-case basis, you might be able to say, you know, this was more or less a righteous thing to do, or it seems like there's a direct connection with the U.S. national security interest. But there are many others where you're just like you know, in the 60s, the FBI was out of control. They were just totally out of control. They were acting extrajudiciously. And the CIA does the same stuff, right? International espionage is not a pretty thing, right? I mean, people get murdered by hit squads, and their kids get murdered, and you know, like it's dirty work. I'm not. Sometimes it seems at least to be a kind of pressing national interest, but in other instances it seems pretty like pretextual or attenuated. It just seems like a lot of bad guys doing bad stuff.
I don't know.
But that's, I mean, I don't know enough about CIA operations in the 1960s to say, in Brazil, to say whether they were good, you know, like whether I could express opinion as to whether like, yeah, this was really important that we wind up doing this, or no, it was all bullshit. We were all scared shitless of the commies, and so we just, you know, overcorrected for that. I don't know.
I don't know enough about Brazil.
I mean, it's hard to say, you know, you always think you know something, and then as you read more, you realize, like I was saying about Vietnam, right? Like people think like I thought, right? You're almost confused because you're like, well, Ho Chi Minh was a nationalist, and you know, they really just wanted independence from the French and from the Chinese, and he made his appeal to America and the Western powers in terms of like, we're basically going by like your Declaration of Independence. Like we should be independent. We're an independent country. We should be. We've been, you know, colonized and whatever. And that always like struck me as like a pretty persuasive case. And like I was always confused. Like, why did the U.S. not? So like, what was the reason? We say, well, because he was communist, right? And we hated communism. But it's much more complicated than that, right? There's layers of policy, right? There's deal, you know, it's true that the United States was terrified of communism, but it wasn't like Vietnam scared them,
Yeah.
right? It was, you know, they thought that Russia and China were, and every other communist nation were acting in lockstep, which they weren't. And we also had to take into account the French, had to take into account the Japanese. These are, you know, the French are our allies. We need them to help to consent to the rearmament of Germany so that we can have a united front against Russian Soviet aggression, right? And then in Japan, we have to rebuild Japan in a way that doesn't also repower China or the militants in Japan that are still around, right? I mean, you have to account for all these things, and of course, at the end of the day, we're like, look, we have to worry about Europe, who are our traditional allies. That we just liberated them. We got to worry about the Japanese and get their economy back up. And there are all these competing interests. You know, the Vietnamese independence is not at the top of the list of priorities, and so Vietnam gets fucked. It's essentially how it works, right? But it's not just because like, oh, Ho Chi Minh was communist. That's the simplistic answer. That, you know, if we had said, hey, Ho, we're with you here. We're going to help you. Like, you know, and make sure that the French behave or get the hell out of your country or whatever it is. You know, he wouldn't have been communist. He didn't care. He just didn't want the Chinese to come take over. Right? I mean, we always worried about the Chinese. But the Chinese, when they would come, they weren't coming to help Ho Chi Minh and the Vietnamese. They were coming to take over, right? I mean, if they could kick our asses in the meantime, they would do it like they did in Korea. But Ho Chi Minh didn't want that.
Yeah.
You know, at least as far as people know, as far as the history suggests. But you know what I mean? It's my point is just that like I had a very simplistic understanding of like the geopolitical mess that was post World War II, and the kind of the choices that were made. And we can look back and say that was a terrible choice or it was uninformed. But I think that happens every day at varying levels of the U.S. government. And the CIA, I'm sure, is just an extension of and maybe even a mover of some of these misconceptions and mistakes and terrible ideas and criminal actions, you know. And so I don't say any of that to excuse anybody, you know, or any like war crimes or anything, but just to say it's like hard to judge from the outside with limited information.
Yeah.
So that was the thing with Jim Jones and that he was working with the CIA down in Brazil. And there were, I mean, people would get swept up, they'd get tortured, you know, they'd get killed. I don't know how much of a connection specifically between Jim Jones and where he was doing and who he was meeting with, and the people who wound up getting. You know, there's all sorts of weird stuff that happened with his passport. You know, there's like a whole cottage industry that tracks him during this time. He basically just disappeared. You know, on the basis, and the guy that, you know, I'm listening to who talks about this stuff is like, there's a lot of dots to connect here. This isn't just like crazy talk, right? And people aren't just like making stuff up. There are definitely like specific points in the history that we know that he was, there's an excellent chance that he was somehow involved, you know, in the CIA operations.
Did they have any idea of what the operation goal was?
I mean, my recollection of it was that he was, that the goal was to suppress, counter-revolutionary or Marxist, communist elements in Brazil or South America at the time.
That was like Count Int Op or something.
What is
That was a widespread program, wasn't it?
What is it called?
It's like counterintelligence operations, Count Int Op or something.
Coin. There was.
Coin Top or something.
Yeah, I don't know the whole history. I don't even listen to the.
That was.
And read a book about it, but.
That was the program that was involved with the infiltration of the Black Panthers, I believe.
Oh yeah, that was the U.S. one.
Yeah, also the Ku Klux Klan and other.
I mean, they were.
Yeah, they were everywhere. I think that there was like a bubbling of people grouping up.
Well, J. Edgar Hoover was apparently very paranoid for good reason, you know, and so he was not exactly a scrupulous person. Yeah. But to the cult, I mean, I don't know. It's an interesting thing when you get to the point where you're willing to like abandon and or hurt your family and friends because you think there's like your leader is the second coming, and your path to salvation is through whatever orders that person is giving you.
Well, if that guy has like the CIA behind him and you don't know it, he's probably going to seem pretty magical. Like that's some crazy stuff.
Yeah, and he would talk about that stuff too, but he never really. My sense was that he never kind of was like, oh, I'm buddy with the CIA.
Yeah.
Because that was anathema to
so, like, imagine
civil rights.
You had access to all of this person's information at will.
Well, he was totally paranoid about it, right? Like he was totally drugged out. By the time they went down to Bolivia, he was a total junkie. So he'd have these paranoid, delusions and fantasies about how people were out to get him. He staged his own death multiple times. He had all of this. He militarized his male followers. They would walk around with guns everywhere they went to protect him, supposedly, from assassination attempts. It's hard to separate out like what.
Who was trying to assassinate him?
I mean, he just had these imaginary. I don't know if there was anyone who was actually trying to I don't know if there was anyone who. I don't remember hearing about anyone who actually tried to kill him. Right? There may have been. I'm sure he got death threats. He did get death threats back in Indiana.
For stealing people's daughters and stuff?
No, for preaching integration, right? For being.
And they think he worked for the CIA? Yeah.
Well, I mean, he's a smart guy. He was always a charlatan. He never really believed that he was the son of God, except maybe when he got so wasted towards the end, maybe he started believing that stuff. But he knew, I think what he would say is that all this stuff is bullshit. And this is what he would say to his followers, right? Because they knew he would involve them in his faith healing and all these tricks that he learned, when he was a, faith preacher, Pentecost, whatever it was.
Throwing snakes at people.
He'd speak in tongues. I mean, he would do the whole thing. This was his song, his whole thing. I think his perspective was, it doesn't matter what brings people to God. If doing miracles like fake, like little circus acts in the church is going to bring people to Jesus and get them to act and live a better life and make them happy, well then I'm going to speak in tongues and heal people and do whatever.
Yeah.
The fact that they're changing their lives is the most important thing, not whether or not these miracles are, or not that I'm the son of Jesus or anything. Yeah. But as time goes by, the lies pile up, and you do more and more drugs, and you get more drunk on the power. The way that this guy put it, the narrator was like, "Look, just imagine that you go around a group of people, and they all believe that actually what you say is the word of God, that you are
that'd
the
be
Messiah.
Crazy.
And they would all lay down and die for you. And all they do all day is sit there and talk about how great you are.
What would you do?
Well, this is the whole thing. It's like when you live in that environment for a long enough period of time, you no longer have a sense of reality.
Yeah. So what would you do?
I mean, I think anyone who is in that environment, right, for a long enough period of time will go insane, or will lose touch with reality.
Yeah, like, all right.
It's like the people who do, you know, like here's a great example, and I think I was on this path. I'm going to bring it back to jiu-jitsu, right? I'm going to bring it back to jiu-jitsu for a second. When you start jiu-jitsu, and especially back when I started, when there were very few black belts, right, that were teaching, and you know, jiu-jitsu still was pretty much the province of the Gracie, you know, Elio's sons and like their authorized representatives.
Yeah.
You go in and you think this is the best, and these guys know everything, and everyone else is a fraud.
Yeah.
You go in, you believe that, right? Like, you saw Hoist, you see Hickson, you see Henzo, you see, you know, all these guys like killing it, right? And you're like, yeah, I believe it. These guys are the shit, right? Everyone else is fake. And even, I mentioned Henzo, but that's not fair because even Henzo was not part of that group.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, he wasn't explicitly condemned by Elio, but he also was not part of.
He was a cousin.
He was a cousin. He wasn't a son. Yeah. Right? So, I remember when I first moved from Florida to New York, people discouraged me from going to train at Henzo's.
Yeah.
You know, they were like, you know, we do the right way. This is like the pure water, jiu-jitsu, right? We wear gis, you know, the whole thing. He's a great fighter, but like his technique is not so good.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of the, you know, he's a tough guy. Like they're not insulting him, but they're saying like, you know, this is not the right way.
Yeah.
And you're kind of tempted. You know, I trained for 2-3 years down in Miami. You know, these guys are legit. I met Elio Gracie, you know, like he was there at the blue belt ceremony. You know, like this was like I was indoctrinated in a way. And you don't know any better. You don't have any other information at that point. Yeah. This is like pre-internet, right? Or web where you could go to things. We're still on AOL.
Ask Jeeves.
Right, if that. And then when you go in, you almost have an attitude.
Yeah.
Right? Like, oh, I'm the shit.
Yeah.
You know, and that lasted for like about 30 seconds, right? Into the first roll where you get murdered because, you know, and I think everyone just footlocked and heel hooked me, you know, in the first couple, and I didn't even have to do that. I mean, that was just because I was just leaving my legs out.
Yeah.
I didn't know anything, because nobody would do it at, you know, in my original school. And so you go through this process of, you know, disabuse of education, re-education, right? And if you are in that system for a long time, the worse it gets and the more calcified, and then you never want to even go, like, why would I even go there? That place is terrible. They don't do the right way. This is the right way. Why would I waste my time and my money and whatever? These guys are savages. They don't know what they're doing anymore.
Yeah.
You know, it becomes easier to kind of avoid even confronting that reality. And I saw it too when people would come from, like, because there were people who would come up every once in a while from Miami, and I would roll with them, whoever we were, and they would have this kind of similar kind of like shock of, I don't understand why this stuff that I'm doing is not working as well as, and why these people are all doing very different things, and you know, like,
it's different.
You know, when you have that kind of like, when you're sealed off in the world, and you're fed the propaganda, and it seems to work within your little bubble. Yeah. You know, like you start the human ability to rationalize, to avoid any kind of contradiction in your all your preconceived notions is amazingly strong, and you will go out of your way after you've invested all that time and money and effort and whatever to like not become educated.
So you think it's like, are you saying that maybe it's like sunk cost fallacy maybe?
What's that?
Like the sunk cost fallacy where
I think it's like a version of that, right? Where you're just like, you have too much ego invested in what you think is the true path.
The way.
To accept that there might be other ways.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so when someone tells you like this is the only way or this is the best, and they might be telling the truth, but if they stop you or discourage you from actually kind of going out and figuring this out on your own,
Yeah.
Like that's the dangerous part. Like only I can tell you what's good for you, Kevin. You know, like trust me. Don't you? You know, and there's all these kind of subtle and not so subtle ways to intimidate people, right? Like at the school that shall remain nameless. You know, if you went and trained somewhere else, or you started using other techniques, or I heard him say, he's like, if I see somebody doing something that I know is from somewhere else, like I won't promote them, right? And so you're held back.
Kind of. Okay.
Right? And then eventually he'll drop a hint like, hey man, that card was garbage, or why are you doing daily heat?
If it's so garbage,
why are you doing that daily heat crap?
If it's so crap.
Yeah, but see, you can't. See, this is the thing. You don't. So this is the other thing. People want. They want the brand name of the belt. They want to get promoted by someone with a big name, right?
Makes sense.
So if you've been out of school with a more or less high-profile instructor, or somebody's, or that person's going to come and promote you,
Yeah.
and you're going to get that, that imprimatur, right? Like that, like I'll pretend to be Elio, right? Like I'm Elio Gracie, and and you can walk around and say, hey, I got my black belt or purple belt or whatever from Elio Gracie. People are like, whoa, you must be the chosen one, right? Like, but that's powerful, right? Like how many people, if you said like, would you rather have your black belt from, me or Hoffa Mendes? I think 99% of people would be like, I'd rather have my black belt from Hoffa Mendes.
I'll be the 1%.
But, we can debate the merits of that. But I think what happens is that down at the margins, people say, well, I've been at this academy that is under this big name, and I was going to get if I do everything right, I'll get promoted, and I'll be part of this lineage.
Yeah.
Right? And the lineage matters to them more, as much or almost maybe even more than the actual things that they are learning,
Yeah.
right? Or the teaching that they're receiving.
Yeah, but that goes back to like people train for different reasons. Some people.
True. I mean, but I think if you're in an abusive environment or an environment that is manipulative or not holding up its end of the bargain, and you stick around because you think that there's some benefit to being promoted by someone with a big name, as opposed to the actual, they're teaching you something that is good and useful and effective.
Yeah.
And I think that's a problem. And that just doesn't happen in jiu-jitsu, that's everywhere, right? Like,
Yeah.
you don't want to piss off the people that you think can help you in some way.
Or beat you up.
Or beat you up, so, I don't know.
My back has been hurting.
Oh yeah? So you should totally do some more like good mornings and maybe some deadlifts.
Well, I've been training every day, but it's not getting any better. I don't know what's
Well, sometimes you gotta take a rest, Kevin. You're a tall dude, so lower back problems are kind of something you have to look forward to
My
as you
body
get
is
older.
70%.
You should, what you should do? You should start doing more yoga,
Yoga.
more stretching.
Ugh,
Yeah, I know, but I wish I had done more stretches
why?
because it would make me stretchier than I am.
Yeah, that's true. You could have weightlifted, you'd be even less stretchy.
I don't know. Sometimes it's good to either be super non-flexible or super flexible, but when you're in the middle average, I don't think it's so good.
I mean, I think it's perfectly fine. It's just not spectacular. You're not going to do anything nobody else has done.
That's not true. I get hurt by anyone else.
I mean, not in terms of like your flexibility, I'm sure you're a true snowflake with lots of talent.
So unique. I am. Thankfully, no one else is as talented as me.
Oh man, I've never met anyone as talented
Oh,
as
I
you.
know. Thank God. Good for them. I wouldn't want to wish that, my level of talent, on anyone. What a burden. The burden of greatness, Kevin. The burden of mediocrity.
Is it possible to have negative talent? Where like, wherever I go, talent just leaves the area? Like,
Yes, that is very possible. You could be such a loathsome and terrible person, unpleasant person, that decent people don't want to be anywhere near you. And they flee you.
I could be that guy.
Yeah. Actually, it's hard. It's hard to be that guy.
I could be loathsome.
Oh, I know what I'm going to talk about. Gina Carano.
No, I don't want to.
Why?
First of all,
What?
Eh.
I mean, you know what? Every time I think, you know, I like to say that the jiu-jitsu community is very like tolerant, and you know, I know she's not jiu-jitsu, she's like MMA.
Yeah.
But I think that's like jiu-jitsu adjacent.
I don't get. All right, can we go over what?
Something she says some weird, you know, some stupid shit, and
It was stupid, but like I didn't get an intolerant vibe.
well, what do you mean intolerant?
Like, wasn't she comparing conservatives to like Jewish people in concentration camps?
Well, not exactly, but close enough. Yes.
Like, can you clarify that?
So, you know, she was talking about, you know, the premise of her, I'm paraphrasing her tweet because I didn't memorize it, but it's essentially like, you know, because history isn't, and this is the ironic part of this, because she gets her history wrong, but, you know, she says, you know, people don't, because history isn't taught anymore, people don't realize that, you know, the Nazis didn't have to, you know, round everyone up and beat them and kill them because they get their neighbors, you know, they would convince the neighbors to hate them so much.
Like the pogroms.
Yes, and so that was the thing. Like, so she posted a picture of a famous pogrom that I didn't know. I mean, I know the pogroms, but I know that one. And one of our friends, who I won't name, you know, because I thought I didn't see the tweet. I don't follow Gina Carano, so I didn't see it originally. I just had heard about a description. You know, I said, look, you know, you're right. She wasn't expressing an intolerance towards Jewish people. It was not an anti-Semitic.
No, it was definitely insensitive.
Post, right? So let's be clear there. She was not saying she hated Jewish people or was like making any kind of sideways or explicit kind of criticism of Jewish people, right? Like,
maybe, I don't know.
but no, well, that's not how I took it either.
Yeah.
She was not saying like, she wasn't propagating any like, you know, Jewish anti-Semitic conspiracy theories or whatever, which aren't uncommon on the right either.
It was just distasteful.
Well, here's where I think where it becomes problematic, right? Deeply problematic. And this is, so here's set back for a second. This is not the first post that she has made that has been a little controversial.
Oh, so this is like a 3-strike thing?
This is like a 3rd strike thing.
Alright.
All right. So this is like the straw that broke the camel's back. I mean, I think maybe she just didn't. You know, maybe she wanted to get out of her contract or something, and she did this on purpose. I don't know.
Weird way,
but you know, there is so first off, I mean, there is I don't like to use this word. Maybe I won't use that word. I'll use this word. I'll use the twisting of historical events.
What's your original word?
Weaponizing. Because I don't think she's not weaponizing it, right? She's twisting historical events to compare herself and conservatives, the two Jews who were persecuted
You think she's
in
twisting
Europe.
historical events? I thought she was twisting present events.
Well, they're both. I mean, I'm thinking of it as like a kind of a double helix, if you will. Like they're both twisted around because she's getting both sets of facts wrong.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, the fact is that in that pogrom, right, it was engineered. It was carried out in large part by the Ukrainian nationalists who were essentially Nazi sympathizers.
But it wasn't like legally written out. It was just like
No, it was so there were like German death squads that were present.
Yeah.
They helped, you know, with logistics and you know,
but
intelligence and like structure. And the Ukrainian, you know, nationalists who were like an actual group, like a political party, and a military, like they had their own, I guess, army. They were there, right? Yeah. And there was also a mob. There was a crowd of people.
I'm not saying that
it
like
wasn't
the officials like didn't know about it. I'm saying like it wasn't like legally sanctioned. Like it wasn't like, you know, everyone voted and they all decided
the group of now I'm not an expert in Ukrainian history at all, right? So I don't know, but my understanding from very limited reading is that they essentially were operating hand in glove with the Nazis because they knew the Nazis were about to invade and would take over.
Yeah.
And they would become the new government.
Yeah.
They would form the new government.
Yeah.
So it essentially was a de facto state sanctioned, right? I mean, it's kind of like.
It'd be like if the militias started taking over.
No, it's more like let's say the Democrats had just gotten elected.
Or the Boy Scouts.
Whatever. Let's say the Democrats just won the election, right? Or are about to win the election, and they started rounding up. They started rounding up all the Republicans that had opposed them, right? And started like sending them off to, you know, re-education camps or whatever, punishing them, right? Imprisoning them.
In all cities? That'd be crazy.
Well, whatever. I mean, this is just a limited example. But the idea that it was, you know, the Nazis just kind of like spreading propaganda that turned one neighbor against another, distorts the history of Jewish persecution in Europe, because it wasn't like, yes, these people were neighbors, but the anti-Semitic myths that kind of undergirded persecution had been present in Eastern Europe for a long time. That wasn't something that the Nazis invented, right? They may have fanned those flames, they may have reintroduced, they may have used that as a way to drive that wedge even deeper. But I don't think it was like, the Nazis, because what she's doing is she's comparing, basically liberal Democrats to Nazis is what she's doing. Yeah. And then she's comparing the conservatives. And these pictures, you can go and look at these pictures. The pictures that she posted, there's one, itself is bad enough, but if you go back and look at the actual pictures of the powder room, and they have them, it is chilling, hard stuff to look at.
She's not comparing the Nazis to them, she's comparing the neighbors who were took part in the pogroms, right? Not the officials, but the neighbors.
Both.
But you're saying that like the Nazis were complicit, is that the word?
Well, the Nazis, they helped engineer the whole thing, right? But it wasn't like the Ukrainians were just like these passive group of people, like the non-Semitic, right? Like the Christian.
They started kind of shitty, and then this group of people.
There were pogroms before there were Nazis.
Yes, true.
Right? It's not, the Nazis did not invent Jewish persecution.
Yeah. But the Nazis did create the environment in which it was not acceptable, but the people wouldn't face.
Well, the Russians created that environment too. It wasn't like, look, I'm not defending German Nazis either, but they did not invent anti-Semitism, right? And they didn't invent pogroms, and they didn't invent, it got bad, it got obviously really awful, right? Yeah. But the whole idea that you're going to use that history, right, in order to make a comparison to, I'm getting blowback because Trump supporters go and invaded the Capitol and tried to kill some lawmakers. That is especially perverse, right? Because you're saying like, hey, this group of people that have espoused these beliefs, who essentially cheered on, if not participated, with the storming of the US government, right, to stop the election certification, right? We're being punished like the Nazis punished and the Ukrainian nationalists punished the Jews in 1941. It's just totally untrue, right? And it does, I think, a great disservice. We talk about, I don't know if it's anti-Semitic, but what it is to me, it is deeply offensive to the memory of those people who suffered the persecution and the people who fought and died to liberate Europe. Sure. Whether or not it was they knew about the death camps.
If it wasn't wildly offensive and socially inappropriate to say, to make the comparisons that she made was wrong. But can we look at the point that she was trying to make? And
her point is that that conservatives are getting unfair criticism.
Yes. Is that wrong?
Yeah, I think that's wrong too.
Really?
Yeah, for the same reason. Look, here's the thing. If you want to say, if you want to look at conservative beliefs, right? You want to say you want to look at trickle-down economics. That's a conservative. You want to look at deregulation, right? Hey, I think the market should be free. The government shouldn't really be interfering with business. If you want to say hey, I believe in low taxes, small government, these are traditional Republican values. People can disagree in a civil manner about economic policies. If you want to say, hey, I don't believe in the welfare state, I think that minorities would be better served, in other ways, other than welfare or food stamps, whatever it is, social programs or affirmative action. Okay, I think reasonable people can disagree based on whatever data you have, right? These are policy decisions that one could say look, let's look at the data, or maybe you have a moral position about it. You say, well, these are my beliefs. I believe in hard work, or whatever. Fine, right? We can have a discussion about these types of things in a rational, civil way. We might still not agree, right? But I'm not going to try to choke you because you don't want to raise the minimum wage. At least I would. Maybe somebody would, but
I after the conversation.
No, I don't think I've ever gotten so mad at somebody that I disagree with in any of those topics. I don't get mad enough at most of the people on anything. I don't want to choke them or hurt them.
I was just making a joke that we do jiu-jitsu and we choke them.
Oh, okay. But if you want to stop, so here's where the conservatives are really getting the blowback, right? If you're going to propagate a fraud, right? If you're going to say that the election was stolen, which is false, Okay, that is not that's not an opinion, right? Like that's not it's just a lie.
Okay.
Right? It's just a lie. There's no proof of that. Okay? Or no competent proof. I mean, people have said that there is proof, but if you look at it, no court. No court, like election official after election official, Republicans included, Republican judges have all essentially looked at this stuff. All the way from like the local election board, all the way literally to the Supreme Court, and said, and the DOJ and Homeland Security, under your Trump appointees, have said no. It's a lie. There's no evidence, right? So let's just right there. So if you want to say that, you want to propagate this lie, and then use the lie to incite your followers to go and storm, who a significant portion of have been advocating for like the violent overthrow, right, of the government, and you want to send them in after like your own vice president and like other members of Congress, right, and you cheer them on, right? Yeah, people are not going to take you seriously. Like, they're going to get upset. That's an insurrection, right? Like you are encouraging a mob of people to violently attack. It's not just the political opposition. It's your own, your own Republican friends or colleagues or your vice president who are not going to help you interfere with this election. Yeah, you're going to get blowback for that. What's up, guys? So I don't think that is a fair comment in the current, given the current set of facts.
Yeah. I don't know.
Right?
I don't care what Gina Carano thinks, honestly.
Well, I mean, I don't think a lot of people really care, but what's interesting to me is that it's more than, everyone's entitled to their own opinions, as dumb as they are. I'm sure I've got a few dumb ones, hopefully not that dumb.
Yeah.
But it's more the reaction of people, right? Oh my God, this is the cancel culture. You know what came to mind when people talk about cancel culture? I remember Kathy Griffin. You remember Kathy Griffin? She's like a D-list comedian, right? And she like posed with the picture with the severed Trump head. And like, I didn't hear any of these people talking about how, they were pro-free speech and anti-cancel culture. They were more than happy to like kick her to the curb because they offended their cult leader. I mean, their president. So, that's my rant for the day.
I think, although I think what she said was like, it gives you weird feelings to like make those comparisons or to like read those comparisons.
It's totally, that's
like false or not, I'm just like,
totally false.
It's just,
I'm not even Jewish and I'm offended.
Yeah, it's like, not to be done, but I think it is important to look at like the history of like the event that she was referring to and like how easily people can be turned against each other.
Well, here's the thing, right? That's a very facile and false kind of like way of looking at what transpired. Like I said, it wasn't just a couple guys who were like, oh, we just turned them against each other, like the Nazis just did this. No, I mean, this goes back a long way. This is not something that you can talk about in a tweet very well.
You can't completely disregard the responsibility.
But she's not doing it to have like a serious discussion about like pre-war Nazi Germany, right, or Ukraine. She's doing it to score political points, and it's just stupid. I mean, this is the thing. This is the irony of her starting her whole, little Twitter rant with, most people don't, learn this in history, but she doesn't know history either. Well, she's an MMA fighter turned actress. What do you expect?
I'm sure she's trying her best.
Whatever. On that note,
I wonder when.
I think we've lost every viewer we ever had. Maybe we still have a.
I don't know. I worry, now that we're on this weird public platform, what if I say something incredibly offensive because I'm ignorant about the topic?
Well, I think if you say first of all, right? I think we all have a sense of things that we can say or can't say. But look, if you say something that's out of line, apologize. Hey, I didn't know. I was ignorant. But here's the other thing I would say is that if you're saying things that are designed to hurt people, right, or that you have a sense that it will hurt them, it'll hurt their feelings, their sensibilities, it will physically hurt them, right, put them in danger, whatever. I think if you have a moral compass, you should kind of understand this is something that's fair to say. That's not, people are not perfect, right? But I think if you're honest about what you know and you don't know, like, I'm not giving a lesson on anything here. I'm expressing my opinion, and my opinions can be flawed just like any other human.
But she wasn't trying to hurt anybody with her comment. What she said was stupid and hurtful, but she wasn't attempting to say anything
Well,
stupid.
but there's also the idea of like, is there something that I could say that while it is not, so I'll give you a perfect example. Perfect example, I'm glad you brought that up. There's all this other talk about intolerance in the jiu-jitsu community. There's all this stuff about transgender kids in sports. I see this bouncing around amongst and everyone's like, posting memes, like making fun of them. But I actually read this, I'll come back on camera because I think this is important for the two people maybe that are still watching, or may watch one day. Like the suicide rate amongst these kids is really super high.
Yeah.
Super high. So, every time someone posts some crap like that, there's a real possibility that there's a kid who's reading it. And maybe they're maybe you don't know where they're at. You know what I mean? And so you can post a meme or, say something about how, negative about them, right? And your intent maybe to be sincerely like, hey, this is really unfair. I don't think these trans boys should compete against girls. I think that's unfair. It's not really sporty. Whatever, that's your opinion. Like there's nothing wrong with having that opinion. But, the downstream effects of your comments could result. I mean, that's essentially.
Are they trans boys or trans boys?
I don't know. I apologize if I'm getting that wrong, but the end result of this, not the necessary, but one of the results is that there are kids that are listening to this who are going through a tough enough time as it is, and like having people, strangers or somebody piling on the internet and hating on you or whatever, making fun of you, is not helping the situation. That might wind up having some serious, that kid could kill himself, right? I mean, it's like just a shocking number of like 40% of I think I said trans boys who try to commit suicide before they're 18. So you can look. I assume that most people don't want that to happen, and whatever their opinions are. But your opinions have people when you're expressing those things, they can have downstream effects that you don't intend or don't understand, right? So, like when you say things like that, I think, you need to be careful. And so.
That's hard though,
because it's hard. It's not easy, but so people, if you're gonna have an opinion on this stuff, maybe think about it before you open your mouth.
I mean, I would definitely err on the side of don't post mean things on the internet.
Yeah, but it doesn't have to necessarily be mean, right? So I saw a meme the other today where it was, it was like a karate teacher, or a judo teacher, throwing the heck out of some little kid. It's like, Joe, who identifies as a 5-year-old, wins. And so it's obvious, you're not even referencing trans kids in that meme, but we all know what they're talking about, right? There's another one where it's the motorcycle driver is racing the Tour de France, and he's motorcycle driver who identifies as a cyclist, wins Tour de France in record time.
Yeah.
It's obvious, they're not mentioning it, but anybody knows, knows what they're really referencing.
Yeah.
And that has an effect on some I think of a 13-year-old kid who reads that, who's having a tough enough time. And is that really what Jiu-Jitsu is about? Is that really what we as a community really want to encourage or be part of? It's fine if you won't, whatever your opinions are, that's fine, but maybe express them in a way that's not so hostile to some poor little kid who, doesn't know up from down, and could hurt themselves because they think that everybody hates them.
Yeah.
So
I agree.
Maybe these people, it's the same thing. It's maybe these people who repeat this stuff, it's a big lie. They think, it's a conspiracy theory, whatever. But there are crazy people who take this shit seriously, as we have seen, and who are ready to turn into a murderous mob. These things have consequences, even if you don't intend them.
But am I responsible for those unintended consequences?
I mean, if you become aware of the consequences, or you should have been aware. That's always the question. Or if you should know better, right?
Yeah, should.
There's certain things, when you're a 17-year-old kid, you say a lot of stuff that you think is funny and you don't really always understand. But when you're 27, 37, 57.
But I feel every 10 years you look back and you realize
how dumb of a person you were. Yeah, I mean, we all grow, right? No one's perfect. No, it's perfect, and I think I think intention does matter in these things for sure.
Yeah.
And having an outlet that is at least somewhat positive as opposed to like, I don't want to talk about how people should be like I don't always like every politician. I'll call them cowards if I think they're cowardly.
Yeah.
But I'm not calling for them to be executed, right? I'm not calling for them to die because I disagree. Even if I disagree with their most racist and terrible anti-democratic ideas, I'm not up there going like these guys should be rounded up and shot.
Do you know anyone who's saying things like that?
Who, me personally?
Yeah.
I don't know anybody, but I see it.
Where do you see it?
You go on Facebook, you'll see it all the time.
So you know those people?
I mean, I have 1,000
You have
Facebook.
1,000 Facebook
I have probably
friends?
more than 1,000 Facebook friends, and it's a cross section of jiu-jitsu. So I have everybody, man. I have everybody. And part of me is like, I like that because even though I'm not like, I don't agree with them, or I really disagree, like forcefully disagree with some of the things that they say or think, it's still like, I like to kind of see it to know, like, what are they talking about, right? I mean, I don't approve of it, but like, I'll watch it.
I don't know. It seems
I have
unnecessary.
deleted a few people lately, and I have muted a few people. Because I can't take it, like it gets me radicalized to listen to them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, it's such a violent, not violent, but like a mentally violent.
You want to push back.
You want to push back, you're like, you're wrong. But that doesn't work. It never works. I've never convinced anybody that they're wrong. So I don't expect it to start being successful anytime soon. So what's the point? Why do I waste my time? Just getting mad.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I just click them off. Not forever. I usually pause them for 30 days or whatever.
Maybe I should post more mean-spirited.
No, be good. Be good. Be a good person. Be a good. Jiu-jitsu should be positive, right? That's the thing. It should be positive.
There is I don't know. I have a buddy who posts offensive memes, and he does.
Offensive to whom?
Like the people that we're talking about, just outliers, minorities. He's
No, I don't do that. I don't want to be associated with those people.
But the thing is, if you were a transgendered person and you went to his gym and you wanted to train, he absolutely would train you.
Probably. This is a scary. No, I agree. I know that
it's a weird dichotomy between people who are willing to be offensive in the name of humor, but at the same time they will be kind to you if you give them a chance.
But see, that's the thing. It's like there's a wide community of people who they don't maybe know that, and they're not going to go to that gym because they know that this guy's a jackass on social media, but it's also like, do you want kids to be? I wouldn't want my kids to be going to some of these places with these guys or seeing this stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, I would be afraid for their safety.
I would just be afraid of my kids becoming like them.
American History X. All right, guys. Enough of my social moralizing. Sorry, we'll have to get back. We have to do some more. We get too much into this stuff. You asked me about Jim Jones. That's the problem. It gets me.
Can we start a Kenton Town?
No. Just as long as there's no Kool-Aid allowed.
Let's knock on.